Today we're going to talk about output and also specifically input. So we're going to look at the output, so printing stuff to the user, which we've seen before using the print, but we'll go through that a little bit more. And we'll also go into user input, so having the user type in stuff from the keyboard. And then you can save that so that you can make a program that's a little bit more interactive with the user, asking them to do stuff, prompting them for information, and also putting back out information to them. And this is really nice because you don't need to know all the information beforehand then. You can also kind of rely on the user to put in some of the information. Yeah, so let's just dive right in. And let's just look at the general format of an input first. So we're just going to save our input in a variable, and we're just going to call this a variable var. And we're going to assign it the value. And now we're going to do the input. So the input, we write the keyword input, and you can see it gets highlighted, which means it's a special keyword, and then we put open and close parentheses. So this is the simplest form of the input, but I also have the option to deliver a message to the user, and I can do that by putting quotation marks inside of the parentheses, and then inside here I can type in the message to the user. And so what this is going to do is it's going to prompt, or it's going to display this message to the user, and then it's going to ask them for input. And this message to the user is so that you can kind of make it more clear what exactly you want from them. So let's just see this in action, and we'll just comment this out to kind of leave it as a reference up here, but let's just really see this in action. So let's start with a name, maybe. So we'll ask the user for their name, and let's save it in their name variable. So we'll type in name, or we'll call our variable name, and we'll have it be equal to the input from the user, so the input keyword, and then open and close parentheses. And inside, I'm going to deliver the following message to the user. I'm going to deliver, please enter your name. And then afterwards, let's just print the name so that the user enters their name, and then we print it back to them, we show it back to them. So let's just run this and see how that works. So now we get the prompt, please enter your name, and I'll just type in my name, Max, and then it prints it back out to me. So we see here the message that's delivered to the user, please enter your name, and this tells me what the program wants from me, and then I enter my name, and then I print it back out. Now, this formatting here looks a little bit weird. So we have name and Max, they're joined together. Maybe it'd be nicer if we formatted this a little bit better. So we could, for example, put a colon here and just a space. And now if we run this again, now our format's a little bit nicer. Now we have please enter your name, and then there's a colon and a space. And now when I put in my name, the format looks a little bit nicer than up here, where it's joined. And so I enter this, and I get my name printed back out to me. Now, this formatting thing, it doesn't make a lot of difference to your program. So your program works just as well if you leave it like this or if you do this. But it may be a nice thing to consider if you want to have a nice user interaction. So if you want it to look nice to your user and not kind of clumsy, then these formatting things may be something that you'd like to consider. Yeah, so the next thing we'll do maybe is we'll look at how to input numbers. So let's ask for my name, and now let's ask for the age too. So let's create a variable age, and let's have it be equal to the input, and then open and close parentheses. And then we're gonna deliver a message to the user, and this message is going to be, please enter your age. And then we're going to have our colon and a space behind for formatting. And then afterwards, let's just print the age back to the user. Now, before we run this, there's one important thing to consider, or to note rather, that when I put in an age, or when I input anything here, when I ask for input, everything is going to be inputted as a string or as a word. So no matter what I put in, it's going to be a string. So if I put in my age, for example, what I'm going to get is, so my age would be for 21. So if I put in 21, what I would get is the word 21, consisting of the numbers 2 and 1, rather than the integer 21. And so for this printing, it may not make a lot of difference, but if I wanted to do math, for example, with it, may make a difference, or it will make a difference. So let's just leave it like this first, and then let's see what happens. And then in a second, we're going to change it to make sure that it's actually an integer rather than a word or a string, which it is right now. But yeah, let's just, and we'll take this out above here so that we only get asked for our age right now. And now let's just run this and let's just see. So now, please enter your age, and we enter 21, and we get printed out 21. And now here we can't really tell the difference if it's an integer or a string. It looks the same. But let's say I want to print out my age plus 1. And now if I do this, and I ask for input, and I put in 21, then it's going to give me an error. And it's going to complain that, well, it's going to tell me specifically I can't convert int object to string implicitly. But what that means is that this here is a string and this is a number. So what this actually looks like is print the word 21 plus the number 1. And the computer doesn't really know what that means, because for strings or for words, if you use a plus and you have another word here like this, then what you're going to get, so this is the same thing as print 211. So you're just adding this string to the end of this one. That's how the plus works for strings. But if we have numbers, then the plus works in the way that we know it from math, and we would get 22. So 21 plus 1 is 22. And now the problem the computer is having is that it has the word 21 here, and it has the number 1 here. And the plus thing does different things for both of them. And it doesn't know which one to do. And it can't just pick a random one and decide. So it's telling us that we're conflicting, because we have an integer here and we have a string here. So how can we fix that? Well, what we can do, for example, is we can convert our input to an integer. After we get it in, we can make it an integer. And the way we do that is that we put the int keyword before the input, and then we open and close parentheses around the input. And now what are we doing? Well, we're asking for their age, and so in here we're going to get the word 21, and then we're going to try to convert it to an integer. So this whole thing, this input and then the message to the user, which is please enter your age, is going to be replaced by 21 when I put it in a second. And then to make it an integer, I put in the int keyword, and I open and close parentheses around it. And if it's possible, I'm going to try to convert this to an integer or a number. So let's see this. So please enter your age. I type in 21. And now I do get age plus 1 is 22. So we've successfully converted our input to an integer. Now, what would happen, for example, if I didn't type in the number, but if I typed in a word? So if I run the program again and I input my age, and this time I type in 21 in words, it's going to give me an error again, because now it's going to tell me it doesn't know how to convert the word 21 to an integer. And so here what it does, it goes to this string and it sees that each character inside is a number, and so it has no problem converting it to a number. But when the int goes through the words 21, it only sees characters, and it doesn't know how to convert characters to numbers. So this int would only work if you actually only have numbers here. Okay. There is another way that we can do this too. So if we take out the int function from the input, and we leave our input as a string, another thing that we could print 22 is if we just put the int around the age. So let's run this and let's see. So now please enter your age. We type in 21 again, and now we also print in 22. So what's the difference here? Well, the difference here is that inside the print function, we take the integer of the age, or so we convert our age to a number. But actually, our age is still a string. So after this, our age is still going to be equal to the word 21, and we've only temporarily converted it in here. So that's the difference, and that's something that you may want to consider. Maybe you want to keep this as a word, and maybe you only want it as an integer in certain places, or maybe you want to keep it as an integer here, so that you always have it as an integer. And then you don't have to use this, because this will now always be a number, because we're converting it to an integer up here, if we can. Okay, so what happens though if we, for example, want to use a string? So now we've converted it to an integer up here, and all of a sudden we decide, it'd be nice if we could use a word here rather than a number. So what we can do, for example, so if we wanted to write 211 like we did before, so we want to add the character 1 to the end of the string, and we have an integer here. So if we run this, we would get the same error that we got before. We would get that we have an integer here, so a number, and a string here, and we have the plus symbol, and it doesn't know what to do with the plus because once we have a number on the left and we have a word on the right, or a character on the right, and the plus means different things for them. But what we can do is inside here, we can also just change the age to a word or a string. And we can do that by typing in the keyword str, which is short for string, and then we open and close parentheses around what we want to convert to a string or to a word. And what this is going to do is this is going to convert, so str of age is equal to str of, and then when I put in 21 up here, it will be string of the integer 21, and this is going to go to the word 21. So this is what the str does, and so it's kind of the opposite of what we're doing up here. Here we have a string, and we're converting it to an integer if possible, and here we have an integer, and we're going to convert it to a string. And so this back transformation is much easier, because here we don't have to check, if it's a character or something, because everything we have here is definitely going to be a character. So yeah, let's run this and see what happens. So please enter your age, and we'll just enter 21. And now we use it as a word down here, and we print out 211. Okay, cool. So what else can we do with input? Well, if we try to combine some of the things that we've done before, so maybe we'll try to combine loops with input, and then maybe combine that with lists too. So let's write a little program or a little script, and let's ask for 5 numbers first. So we'll ask for 5 different test scores in this case. So similar to what we did before, but now we're not going to have the test scores written in manually like we did in the list tutorial, but we're actually going to put them in ourselves. So let's take this out, and let's make an empty list where we're going to store the scores. So we'll call the list scores, and we'll give it the value of an empty list. So right now, scores is an empty list, so it's a list but there are no elements inside. And now we're going to ask the program, or we're going to ask the user 5 times for 5 different scores. So we're going to make a for loop, and we're going to do for, and then we'll just call our temporary variable I. So this is just the temporary variable. So for I in, and now we're going to go, and we want to take 5 values, so we'll just use the range function and do range 5. And so here we're going from 0 up to but not including 5, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. But this just lets us loop 5 times. And there are different ways to do this, but this is just one of the simple ways where you can just create a range of 5 numbers, and you can go through them, and through this you ensure that you go through the loop 5 times. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to have our current score, so we'll create a variable called current score, and we're going to have it be equal to the user input, and we'll display them the message, please enter the score. And we'll add the colon in the space again for formatting. Let's make this a little bit smaller so that we can see. And so currently we're just asking the user for the current store. But let's also let's make this an integer. So we'll just put the int after the input, just like we've done up here. And so we're going to ask them for a score, and then we're going to convert it to an integer. And so now what we're doing is we're asking the user 5 times for a score. But we also want to save this score. So we're going to add this score to our list. So what we're going to do is we're going to append this score to our list. So we're going to take our scores variable, which currently stores the list that we're interested in, and to it we're going to do the following, which we indicate by the dot if we remember. To it we're going to append. And what are we going to append? We're going to append the current score. And then at the end, let's just print the scores. And let's run this, and then let's go through it again, and let's understand it. So we'll just ask for scores. We'll put in 70, 65, 89, 78, and maybe 77. And now we get the scores printed to us. So what have we done? Well, first we've created an empty list called scores, and here we're going to use this to save all the input in later. And now we've created a for loop, and we go through 5 different numbers, which we do by creating the range from 0 up to not including 5. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 5 numbers. And each time we go through the loop, we ask for an input. And in this case, the input is a score. And then we take this input, and it comes in as a string, and we convert it to an integer. And we save it in the current score. And then each time, we also append our current score to the end of this list. So we add the score to the end of this list. So let's just go through this, and let's kind of write it out, and step by step, and kind of understand. So for I in range 5, so I takes in the value 0 first. We ask for our current score. We ask for the input, and so the first input is going to be 70. And so the input is at first 70 is going to be the string 70, and then if we put the int around it, so we still have the int conversion around it, our input is going to go to the number 70, and this is going to be stored in current score. And then we're going to append to the end of scores current score. So what we have right now is we start off with the empty list scores, and to it we append the current score. So we append 70. So our empty list in scores goes to a list that contains the number 70. And now we went through the loop once, so now I takes in the value 1, and we enter our next score, and in this case we entered 65. And 65 gets converted to the number 65. And then we append that to the end of our list. So right now our list is this. And so we append 65 to the end of this list. And so our new list becomes, it becomes 70 as the first element. And now we add a second element to the end, and we have 65. And now we do this again and again, and then we put in 89, we get 89 stored in here, and then we put in 78, and it gets converted to an integer, and then it gets stored, and then we have 78, and then we do 77, and it gets converted, and then we store it. And then when we print scores, we see that our list contains all these scores. So cool. Now we've managed to, now we're kind of better at taking input, and we also don't need to define all of our numbers up front, so we can kind of let that happen as our program runs. And so the scope of our programs can be a lot broader now because we don't have to know everything up front. We can also make it up to the user to put in whatever they want to do. So yeah, let's make the formatting a little bit nicer here, and let's do every time we enter a score, let's also tell them which score is going to be. So we just want to put in the number of I, or rather the number of I plus 1. So we want to tell them if it's score 1, score 2, score 3, score 4, score 5, something like that. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to have we're going to end our score here, and to this we're going to add the string of our variable I. So let's just make this smaller for now. So what we're going to do is, to this we're going to add the string of the variable I, and then we're going to make another plus, and then we're going to open close or open the quotation marks again here so that we close them here. And so what we've done is something similar to up here, but rather than having it in the output and printing the word age and adding 1 to it, we formatted it differently. So this is still an output that we show to the user, but in this case we tell them to please enter the score, and then we tell them what score, so we add this word to the string, and then we add this to the end of it again. So now we've managed to kind of input a word into the middle of our output. So let's see this in action. So now when we run our program, we get please enter score 0. So we'll put in 70, and then score 1, 65, and then 89, 78, 77. And now we get the same list here, but our formatting's a bit better here. But we're just still missing one thing. And it looks kind of weird that we have score and 0 and there's no space in between here. So what we're going to do is let's just add a space here, for example. And so this is just going to, if we run this program again now, adding that space there is just also going to put the space here. So now we've made the formatting a little bit nicer again. So we can do 70, 65, 89, 78, and 77. Okay, cool. So now we've managed to add, we've gone through a loop, and we're asking the user for an input every time. And during this input, we're also telling them which score they're putting in. And then we're saving it, and we're adding it to our list so that we can keep track of it. Well, to make it even nicer, let's tell them not score 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, because that score 0 doesn't make a lot of sense. So participant 0, because we usually start counting at 1. So let's tell them scores 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So what we're going to do is we're going to add the string I plus 1. So since we start counting at 0 here, it'd be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. But what we're going to put out is 0 plus 1, so that's 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. 2 plus 1 is 3. 3 plus 1 is 4. And 4 plus 1 is 5. So we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So let's run this again and see. So please enter score 1 now, rather than score 0. We've got 70, 65, 89, 78, and 77. So what we're seeing here is that everything inside here is being converted to a string, or a word, but everything inside here is not yet a string. It's only a string outside of here after this has taken place. And so everything inside here is still a number or an integer. And so we can still do the plus operation with this, for example, on integers. So we can do 0 plus 1, and we don't have a problem with that. And only afterwards do we convert it to a string, and then put it into our output here. So maybe there's one more modification that we want to make. Maybe our scores aren't just going to be integers. Maybe our scores are going to be decimals. And so how do we take care of that? Well, instead of having the integer conversion here, so instead of converting the input to an integer, we're going to convert it to a floating point number, or a float, or a decimal. And so the format is the same. We have the float, and then we have the open and closed parentheses around what we want to convert a float into, or what we want to convert into a float. And if it's possible, we'll do it. And so inside here, we're asking for the score, and then we're going to get back a string that contains a number, and then we're going to try to convert this number to a float number, or a decimal number. So let's run this, and let's see what happens. So please enter score 1. We'll enter 70.2, 65.3 maybe. 89 is going to stay as an integer. 78.7 and 77.5. And so what we see here in the output is that now we have all the floating point numbers. So we don't have just integers. We have floating point numbers, or decimal numbers. So we've got the 70.2, the 65.3, and now what we see is even though here we entered an integer, it actually also got converted to a decimal number. So we got 89.0. So this is no longer an integer. This is really a decimal number, or a floating point number. And then we've got our 78.7 and our 77.5. So yeah. We've seen the conversion here. So the float, even if you have an integer here, it's still going to convert it to the type that you want to convert it to. Cool. So maybe let's just add one more thing, and let's tell them the score that they've entered. So let's print out the score you entered was, and let's print out the score. But there is a different method that we can print out the score too. So we can either print it out like we've done up here using the plus, or we can add the quotation marks here, and we can put a comma, and then we can just put in the next value that we want to add here. And in this case, for example, we can just put in the current score. So let's run this, and then let's see what happens, and then let's make sense of it. So please enter score 1, 70.2. The score you entered was 70.2. Thank you. Let's enter score 2, 65.3, and then let's enter 89, and 78.7, and 77.5. And so what we see here is first we ask for the current score, so please enter the score. And in this case it's going to be the number that we have right here, plus 1. So let's enter score 1, and then we convert that to a float. So in this case, if we have our 70.2 and it's converted to a float, or a decimal number, it's going to be turned into the decimal number 70.2. And then we're going to add 70.2 to the end of this list. So 70.2 here. And then we're going to print out the score that you entered was, and now our formatting here is a little bit different. And you'll notice that, first of all, I got a space here, but also more importantly, I didn't have to convert this to a string. I just put in the floating point number that I had here. So current score is not the string 70.2, it's actually the number 70.2, the decimal number. Yet I was still able to just put in the decimal number here, rather than having to convert it to a string like we did up here. And now the reason I can do that is because this plus is actually doing the plus on strings, so like we've seen up here. What this plus does is it joins all the words, or all the strings together. So that's what we've seen up here. If we do the string of 21 plus 1, we're going to get 211. So if we add plus 1 here, we're going to get 211. And so that's why you have to have the plus here. But what the comma does is that the comma, it takes care that there's a new input coming, or there's a new element coming, sort of. And what it does, it automatically does it for us. So first of all, the comma puts in a space, and then it puts in the current score, and it formats it into a string or into a word automatically, so that we don't have to do it. And so this is another way that we can kind of output it. And so if we want to output something else, for example, afterwards, so let's put in another comma afterwards here, and then let's just output nice. And we can take the space away here because the comma will actually give us a space automatically. And let's just run this, and let's see it in action so that we can kind of better understand what the separation inside this print really does. And so we do a please enter the score, and we'll do 70.2. And what we see here is we see the score that you entered was, which is a string, and then we have our comma, and then we print out the number. In this case, it's also going to be a string, so this is all done just through adding the commas here. And then we add another comma, and then we add a word again. And so this is a nice way that we can kind of mix and match and format your output just like you want it to. And you can think of it kind of like, or in this case, it'd be like a function, you know, that you have your first input into the function. So if we remember how functions look like, we have def function name, and then we have input 1, and then separated by a comma would, for example, be input 2. And then we have our colon to start that we want to indicate that we want to start the function. And then we have here an action. And so what's going on? So you can think of the print thing very similarly, that it's a function, and your first input is a string, your second input is a decimal number in this case, and our input 3 is the string nice. And what the action does is it transforms all of this into this string or this word, and it gives it back and it prints it out. And so you can kind of think of it like that. That's kind of how you can think of the comma like. And the comma also automatically always adds a space. So if you put a comma, there's going to be a space to what you put in before. So if I put in a space here, for example, let's just finish this program first. So let's do 65.3, 89, 78.7, 77.5. So we just finished the program that we ran before. And now if we run this again, after having added this extra space, and let's put in 70.2, we see here now there are two spaces. And so one of the spaces comes from here, and one of the spaces come from the comma that I added here. Okay. Yeah, we're just gonna abort our program now, so that we don't have to type in all the numbers again. But what we can see is that that's adding, that the comma really formats it really, really nicely, and that it also puts in the space. And what we've seen is a nice way to kind of format everything. But what if, for example, we want the current score on a new line? So let's stop this program, and let's make it print the current score on a new line, and let's take this away. And so to make a new line, we're going to put in a backslash, and what this backslash does, it indicates that the next character is special. So for example here, if we have the backslash and the quotation marks, it doesn't mean open and close quotation marks for printing or for strings. It means I actually want to print out a quotation mark. But right now we just want to put in a backslash n, and a backslash n means a new line. And so this backslash indicates that the next character is special, and it shouldn't be interpreted the way it usually is. So in this case, if for example we just had an n, it would just print out an n. But if we do a backslash n, the backslash means this n now has a special meaning. And what this n special meaning is that it's a new line. So let's run this and see. So we do please enter score 1. Let's enter 70.2. And then what do we have after that? 65.3. And, well, let's look back up here. And then we got 89, 78.7, and 77.5. And now what we've seen in the output is that even though we have all this print on one line, we see that it's printed on the next line. But we see the space here again, which comes from this comma. So if we want to avoid that, we take this comma away and we put a plus. But now we have to convert our current score to a string again. It's not going to be done automatically for us, because now we're doing the plus with strings or the plus with words. And the way the plus with word works is if everything is a word, it just all gets joined together. So now we can, for example, convert this to a string and put open and close parentheses around what we want to convert to a string, and then we close our brackets again. And so if we run this and we do please enter the score 1, we enter 70.2. Now we see that the score you entered was, and then we have a new line, and then here we have the score that we entered. And then we do 65.3, and we see the same thing here, and 89, and we see it here, and we see that the integer is converted to a decimal number, which happens because of this float conversion here. And then we have 77.5, or reps, we have 78.7 first, and then we have 77.5. And so we've seen the nice way to kind of format output, and there are many ways that we can do it. It's just important that when we want to output words, we have to make sure that everything is in the same format. And so we have to kind of take care, if we are mixing and matching numbers and words, that it's all in the same format in the end, so that everything understands. And we can use the conversions for this. So we can use the string conversion, or we can use, like we did up here maybe, we did the int conversion, and then we took this away. So now here we made everything numbers inside, or integers. Here we're making everything strings. All we have to do is just make sure that it's all in the same format. And we've also seen the power of using the input. So first to just input name and age, but then we can also use it in a loop, and we can add it to our lists, and then we don't have to know everything beforehand, but we can dynamically put data into our system, and we can use that later, and we can make our program interactive to the user.